just real quick, I'll go through this because we're quickly running out of time. Potential footprints process flow. So I have things on the left that are customer-oriented versus internal IT things on the right. You have your service desk. I say workspace because in the old, well, both in the new and the old version of footprints, we refer to containers as workspaces. And in the workspace, you have incident, in other words, incident management, and then you have the two basic types of service requests, standard service requests, obviously things in your service catalog that we know and do very often, and the non-standard service requests, which are, of course, service requests that are kind of one-offs. In other words, this isn't in our catalog of services, but somebody wants a new feature, a new report, or maybe a new application. And maybe that ends up over in project management or it ends up in release management. And when we're ready to move that into production, then you see the arrows all point to change management. So we end up creating an RFC for anything that updates production. And then you see from change management, we update the CMDB. Now, obviously, since I work for a company that deals in software, I think you should use a tool to enforce this. The tool of my preference is Footprint Service Core. When I say enforce the process, you can use Footprints to, of course, quickly approve RFCs, maybe even before a CAB meeting. A lot of you that are doing change management probably have weekly change meetings, or you may call them CAB meetings. But if you use a tool, you can keep abreast, the RFC, the CAB members can view the RFCs and approve the ones that you can before the meeting. That can help shorten the meeting or help focus in the meeting in on those things that are more problematic, that may have risk that you need to better vet in person with other CAB members. Number two, using a tool, you get buy-in from the CAB member. It's not just to notify. I've actually been to accounts where I've sat in on their change management meetings, and they go around the room saying, well, I'm doing this change this week, and this change this week, and this change this week. Nobody else in the room is really listening, and then the next person reads off what he's going to do, and at best, that's just a notification meeting. That's not a vetting meeting. And if you are getting somebody to approve, when I say somebody, a CAB member to approve each and every change, there's a record of it. So we can go back and say, oh, you're a manager of this area, a change was put in, and it affected your area that you're responsible for. So that's what the note is. Managers are responsible for all failures within their sphere of accountability. So it gets buy-in. It's going to force CAB members to kind of take a look at the RFCs at least and help vet the changes. Because remember, risk reduction is what change is all about. Number three, to ensure that non-routine changes aren't passing as routine, because you don't want people to say, well, I thought this was pre-approved. And one way to do that is to use a tool whereby if they say it's a routine change, then they have to pick which routine change is it, and it should be in a pick list. Here's just some, I won't dwell on this, but here's some typical requests for change fields that we often see in Footprints. Certainly the type of change, those are the three types we were talking about. You'll always want a target date and time. Maybe the duration time of the change, like is this change going to take an hour to implement, or is it going to be 15 minutes, or is it going to be 4 hours? Well, that's important when we start scheduling change windows. The goal of the change is certainly nice to know, what's the expected outcome. Are we doing this change just because? And that's kind of coupled with at the bottom where it says business justification. We shouldn't be doing changes or RFCs just because we feel like it or because it's, going to enhance my resume if I implement this new technology. We should be doing it because there's a real business reason to do it. And that's the tie-in with ITIL. ITIL helps you tie in business needs and requirements and justifications with what we do in IT. Back up to I guess the fifth bullet point. We need to list what CIs are impacted. We might want to know the scope, what departments or who might be affected by this change. We, of course, want to know details of the change. And then the plans, as I mentioned, we want to see the test plan that was performed. What's the implementation plan, the steps that we're going to use to implement it? What's the back-out plan if we put it in and feel that we don't have time to complete it or it's not working in initial tests? And what's the communication plan? Who needs to be notified in the end-user world that we're implementing this change at this time? And then, of course, what resources are needed to implement the change? Here's some typical steps for a change. I've used these 5 steps at probably dozens, maybe hundreds of different accounts. These steps would happen in the process after it's pre-approved by the customers, as I mentioned earlier. That would happen in the service desk. So the customers know this happens and they want it to happen. So now we generally get the IT manager of the person that's responsible for this change to approve that yes, this RFC is feasible. It's something we should be doing. The business justification is such that we know that it's worth the effort. Number 2, the change manager. And yes, there should be a change manager for change management. You need a process manager for every ITIL process, by the way. The change manager looks at it and says, how well documented is this RFC? Does it have everything that the CAB needs to be able to approve it? And so the change manager just simply looks for documentation and says, okay, because what we don't want to do is it goes to the CAB and the CAB says, oh, we need a lot more information. So now we go to the CAB. The CAB needs to scrutinize this because this is the main point where the CAB members look at. So I'm over the network group, so I'm looking at your change request for a database schema change, and I'm saying, how does your change affect what I'm responsible for in the network area? And if I deem it's not going to affect it at all, then I would approve the change. If I think there could be some possibilities, I might want to check with the person making the change and verify that so I can approve it or disapprove it. Number 4, once it's approved by CAB, then we need to implement it. So what we do is we approve that it was successfully implemented by the person that's implementing the change, usually the subject matter expert. And then as a last step, it's nice to say, did this change, once it was implemented in 4, did this change do what we said it would do? So we want some independent validation. A lot of times that's by some customer liaison or maybe even the IT manager that originally approved it. So here's some features as I'm running out of time. I tell you what, we got a little bit late start, so I'm going to continue on for 5 minutes because I'm showing 2:30. Hope that's okay with everybody's schedule. So here's some features and footprints that will help you enable a better change management. And one is the fact that you can view changes online by logging in to your laptops or PCs, or even viewing them from your mobile devices. So that can help enable changes. Number 2 is we can secure and control the approval process. As we saw with the 5 approval steps I showed on the previous slide, we have complete security over making sure nothing gets closed, no RFC gets closed and processed unless it's approved. So there's a lot of control through the process. As far as other footprints features, we can easily build the forms that we need and the workflows that we need using drag and drop. And then we can personalize the forms that are used to fill out these RFCs and the personalized dashboards. And then we can integrate Footprint Service Core with what we used to call Footprints Asset Core. It's now called BMC Client Manager. And for those routine RFCs, and I'm thinking desktop, laptop type things where we need to, there's a request that came in and we need to install software. Well, installing new software might be a configuration change to that laptop, Well, we can automate that, and we can have BMC Client Manager, once it's approved, go out and run the install automatically. Here's some screenshots of FootPrints version 12. This is, of course, just the home page where you might be looking at changes. It's a little bit small, but you can see I have a number of RFCs listed, and they're in they're an item called Change Management. You can see the titles of those. You may have priorities. Of course, you can see the status, whether it's in pending approval or manager review or testing or whatever. I don't always use those statuses, but it's just at a glance. And then, of course, you can dig in and see the details of any one of these RFCs. And we talked about drag and drop. Here's the workflow design in FootPrints version 12. And you can actually design where the approvals occur. And in this case, this is built on some statuses. These are not necessarily statuses I would use because I take built and testing and move those to release management process. But certainly the CAB review would be important as well as the manager review. And then you can create these approvals directly from this drop and drag workflow within FootPrints. And I thought this was an interesting screenshot. This shows you some of the people that you can designate as an approver in FootPrints. You can designate any individual on the individual tab or a team of agents, and you can have a fallback, in other words, a backup approver. But we also have dynamic approvers. We had this in the older versions as well of FootPrints. And you can say, well, I want whoever the contact is of this, or their supervisor, or two levels up, their supervisor, or whoever submitted it, and same thing, their supervisor, or the person implementing it, and same thing, their supervisor or two levels up, or maybe their team, or maybe the team leader. So we don't have to specify a person as the approver. In other words, we don't have to say it's, Bubba is the approver on this. We can say it's dynamically chosen based upon who's implementing or who submitted the change. So we have some, this gives a great ability to create these approval workflows such that we don't have to know specifically who at the time we design the workflow.